Greetings, welcome back to Dawn of Man HP. Strategic Sage here, thanks for joining me again. And we are now looking at the Mesolithic Era, of course. It is the spring of the 20th year, so just basically half a year past when we last left off. Take a quick look at our demographic picture. Not that many children, a lot of people in the prime of life, not that many who are old. And the main thing I was doing at this point in time is really, since we got up to 16 people, I thought that was critical mass enough to change a bit on what we're building. I think it was before this that I definitely switched over to the bone on everything that I possibly can. You can see we still have plenty. Flint is only being used for the axes and the picks, but then I also switched up this management level to 25% for the picks and the axes. And that way, we get a little bit more of them. We only have 2 of them spread amongst 16 people. Maybe those people are off doing something. Having a few more so somebody can mine or cut down trees if we need it. And it isn't even so much about whether or not I'm actually going to specifically need that. I just felt it'd be a good idea to get a little bit more out there. And so as things grow, tend to move to more of a percentage base on more and more resources. Now, there are some details that I feel I've been a bit remiss in taking a look at. So this is Varrick, something like that. An adult woman. You can see she's carrying around blackberries, which she just got done finishing picking. And the bowl there, it's not pottery, it's a wooden bowl, probably made from a hollowed out stump, much like other things we've seen. Then we can also see the leather uniform, clothing, whichever. As opposed to the more colder winter skin outfit, you can see obviously it's shorter, the sleeves and the legs are shorter, it's not quite as bulky. We got pears there for that lady that's coming behind her that we just saw real briefly there. And they're just sort of hanging out in here. But the other reason I want to focus on Varrick for a bit is she's got this axe. And we're waiting for her to come out. Okay, that's a harpoon. So they've got the different implements, and we saw earlier on what the spear, you know, some of the things they do with that, but they also have specific animations for all of the other things. So as Varrick makes her way off somewhere, okay, she's going to stand underneath this tree. They just sort of stand around for a while, and usually they will eventually do... There we go. We're going to mess around with that axe a little bit. Chop around with it a little bit. So they do a series of sort of... It's almost like they're fake practice fighting animations. And then, oh, okay, there's a wolf that decides to show up. So we're going to kill that instead. And then she pulls out her biface and starts butchering. But between, you know, again, there's more harpoons in the back. So there's a lot of detail in here that it's easy to miss when you're looking at the high-level picture. And our wolf is about to become dinner. So the project for the winter was to get up a 3rd skull pole. We have one here, and we're working on a 3rd one here, but they haven't brought the skin over to it yet. That'll be happening moment. Oh, it looks like maybe happening right now. Yes, indeed, and now they're going to get that thing up. So essentially, it's another case of expanding population, and we need more morale recovery, and so that's where we're going to get that taken care of at. There was another death in the spring, but also 3 new pregnancies. I'll definitely take that. And as we pass through the seasons here, keep an eye on the workload, because it's gradually increasing. And that's a significant part of why, as we get into the fall, time for our next upgrade, I went into grain processing. But first, let's look at the what. Looking about at our plants, we obviously have been doing the trees and bushes thing for a while with fruits, berries, nuts. But down here by the river, we have some other options. Flax, can't get to yet. Needs more technical advancement. But we have rye, we have more rye, and we have a harvest icon. We have to harvest these in the fall. It just so happens to be late fall, so we need to get a hurry on this now. So we'll grab another harvesting area for those, work area, and we're going to switch our grain also up to unlimited, because grain lasts, once it's harvested, for 2 years. And of course longer if it's stored properly. So that's a really big advantage it has over other food sources that we have at the moment. If we head on down the river, we have bitter vetch, and that is a pulse. There are also peas that we've found near the camp and elsewhere that are also a pulse. We can't harvest those yet. Those are a more advanced crop to acquire. And pulses are simply legumes that have edible seeds within the pod. That's how those are classified. So if we keep moving on down, we've got more rye. So let's go ahead and set up an area here. And then there's other stuff down this way, some of the peas. We've got more bitter vetch. See, more flax. But we also have some emmer here and some more rye. I think we can probably fit one in between them. So there are different types of grain. There we go. Now we can get them both from there. Then up this way, there's actually a third type einkorn, and there's a total of 4 grain varieties in the game. And the distinctions between them don't really matter to us that much right now because there isn't that much around. We've got to grab whatever grain we can get. Will become more important later on. So as we get everybody to work on those, we actually have a production chain to deal with here. You don't just harvest the grain and eat it. We are going to put up a mortar. And as the description says, a rock to crush grain into flour. And then we also have a storage option, which is the haystack. And that's for the straw, which is, of course, the major part of the plant. The edible part is just the wheat within the heads of the grain at the very top. And we've got people bringing stones over here already. We'll use a couple of these stones to build the mortar. So let's get in here and see that process in action. Get some sort of vaguely decent vantage point. There we go. And you see they're working on the haystack in the background as well. But this is not a particularly complicated build. We're laying the rocks out. And there we go. So we've essentially got an upright stone bowl at an appropriate height for people to use. Let's see if we can catch anybody in the act of doing some harvesting now. And we have one right here. Thank you for being so very cooperative, Emel. That was nice of you. Basically just taking her biface, which is hilarious. It's one of the first tools that we had, and we're still using it here. But, you know, her big rock wedge, and she's whacking away at the plants, trying to cut them down so she can bring them back to the village. I like the detail on the plants here, though. You can see it's not just they're waving around and they've got the heads of grain and all of that. And there we go. So now we've made some sort of improvised basket of sorts, and we're carrying that back. And typically you produce 1 grain and 1 straw when you do this. So let's see if we head back to the mortar. Is anybody doing anything with that yet? Not quite. Get this sped up a bit and wait for somebody to show up. There we go. Brought over the grain, but they're not actually doing anything yet. I think we're going to get that now. There we go. Now, this wonderful gentleman is just pounding away there. And with what? I mean, it's like, it looks like he's pounding the air above the mortar. So that can be kind of annoying, and I'll get into why on that a little bit later. We have a resource situation here to deal with. Because flour, which is what we're turning the grain into, has a shelf life only of half a year. So we're going to lower that down to 25%. And then once they've used that, they're going to come over here to the hearth with it. We're not eating the flour either. We turn the flour into bread here. We've seen this bread thing here forever, but now we can actually use it. Going to drop that down to 25%. Bread only lasts for 1 season. So the idea is that you can store grain for an extended period of time, but you only want to turn it into flour, and especially into bread, when you can actually use it. And now we've got them actually doing it. But on the other hand, one flour becomes 2 bread. So it multiplies a bit. So we've got our grain, our flour, and soon our bread going to show up here in our resource situation. Now, back to the why of all this and sort of the historical context. We are increasing our workload as it is, and this is not an easy job. Harvesting hits the morale. It's just like carrying large stones or large logs or things of that nature. It's classified as heavy labor. But it's still kind of a necessity because we're having to range further and further to get various, plants and food supplements to supplement our hunting. And so the only way for us to increase sort of the carrying capacity of the land and how many people can survive in a given area is to find new food sources. And so that's what we're doing here as we work on bringing over more grain and pounding away again at the mortar. There's a limit to how many people in a given area, and historically around Paleolithic, Mesolithic times, as much as I know, is about 100 to 150 people per community, and that was it. That was optimal conditions. Anything less than that, groups would be smaller. And you can't really exceed that without having more and more ways to feed people. Now, in terms of this actual device itself, the mortar, the more proper name would be the mortar and pestle, because there's 2 parts to it, the mortar being the bowl and the pestle being the roughly cylindrical object that you use to pound and grind the grain into flour. And it's something that's very much still used today in many parts of the world, and not just primitive ones. Got an example in the description below from the cooking channel Serious Eats, going through various mortars and pestles that you may want to use for certain purposes and why some might be better than others, the material they're used out of, all of those kinds of things. I thought that was interesting. But also just that there are some tasks in the cooking realm for which we have not improved on this. It's just the best way to do certain things. Now, the upshot of all this, well, I'm not getting a huge amount out of it, maybe about 15 meals a year, which is a fraction, but a decent fraction of what the village needs, is that over the winter and into the spring, we don't eat much meat at all, because it's nuts and leftover berries and fruit in some cases, and then bread getting us through, and then by the time the bread is gone, we can start hunting again. So this is kind of a strange vantage point, but it is early winter, and I'm choosing this because, of course, the village proper of Inception is up here, but probably not for too much longer. We have another storage tent that I've built up. Of course, we have the one way up there, and we ran out of storage space, so that was sort of necessary. It's flour making time again. And this way, whether they're gathering stuff from way up on this end or way down on this end by the river, there we go, we can get more going. Then we also, due to a population boom, can see we're up to almost double-digit children, and our population demographics weighing more in that direction. Going to get the pulses underway now. So that's our next food source. All those peas and bitter vetch, they are now within our reach, our grasp, as it were. I also want to notice over here, our prestige overall up to 75, grows gradually with population, etc. But it took a jump from about 42 to 65 when we got pottery and moved into the Mesolithic, and I don't think I mentioned that at the time. So moving up to a new era is really a significant bump in that, along with all the other gradual incremental progressions that you get. And with the growing population, we need to continue to grow as well. We're still just throwing up tents and everything in the middle of the woods area, but we've got over here, there's a hearth that I'm about to build. If we take a higher up look at that, and this is all down in this area. I've decided to establish a new hub, if you will. And we've got a mortar down here, we've got a storage area down here, we might as well be able to cook food down here as well. And so this tent's actually facing this way. So we essentially have 2 parts now to the community as we continue to grow towards the river. Long term, my plan is to fill out this valley. You don't have to cut down trees to do that yet, but probably won't be long before we do. Now, it may not happen often, but here's our first actual bear attack. It's trying to chase after Tarzor, one of our elderly down in here. And they run away, but plenty of people around to throw spears and kill the bear. It was an older bear as well. And it's just sort of a good example of how they doesn't happen often, but they can be aggressive, as we've mentioned. But also, we had no problem with it because we have a high enough population. There's usually enough people around. So animal attacks, not really bothering us too much anymore. And he took some serious wounds there, as we can see. But no infection, so he's going to be fine. So a couple things to notice here, one of which is that I'm a big fat liar. Tarzor did indeed get an infection, and he would actually die shortly after from it. And he's worth remembering. If you think back to when we had a bunch of female children and no males, he was the first male that we got that got the population boom going. And he will soon no longer be with us. But also, I wanted to show this. 4 out of 3 female adults are pregnant. Now, it's possible, although I think also possible not, that one of them got pregnant and then was turned to elderly before that, but otherwise, I don't know what's going on here. Is the game drunk? Because if my math serves me right, 4 is a higher number than 3. You can't have 4 out of 3 anything, no matter what. I'm pretty sure math works that way. So, yeah, I'm going with the game as drunk. We continue to advance steadily. It's time for another upgrade. Getting those in about once every year and a half or so on average. See, workload's fairly high here in the summer, working on all the gathering. But we are going to go with archery. And actually, if I do it over again, I probably would have delayed this a hair. But it's still useful. So, I'm going to get rid of that. And then, now that we're over here, we're going to adjust our resources. So archery, well, at the beginning of this, what I'm going to do is I want to have enough weapons for everybody, but not an excessive amount. So I'm going to drop now our spears to 75% and improve our archery, if I go the right direction, to 25%. So we still have 100% of the population covered with a primary weapon. It's just we're going to start getting some of these in. And we'll go ahead and have that go to constant production. As we can see, these are only useful for hunting, but they're better at it than anything else we have. Our bone spears have 2, flint spears have 2, archery is 3, and of course we can also hit them from longer away with those. So, those are really going to help us as the population increases hunt better, and that was the reason that I did it, because the population does continue to grow. You can see we've got a couple more pregnancies on the way. Almost half the population still in the children area of the demographic. But, again, we could have waited on this. Whatever, we're going to get them all eventually. It's not a huge deal either way, and now we've got a bunch more stuff to work on at the crafter. Check out the rather absurd volume of meat that we've got right now. And the reason for that is population growing, meaning we need more clothes, we need more tents, all that's requiring more skins. And getting those skins produced a lot more meat than we really need. So supply is kind of unbalanced at the moment. Snowy, cold weather or no, we continue to work on this second hub that we have going on. You can see there's a lot more here in the haystack. It's actually only about a third full. They hold 40 units of straw. We're never above like 2 dozen right now. We're totally fine there. We're chopping down this tree here to make more room. We've got a couple of tents here. We're going to expand out this way. And again, we're focusing on the beech and the birch. See, I'm not sure about what this one over here is. We've got an oak around. We're going to leave those with the tannin. But we proceed with being ready for future expansions because we've reached the point where we really have to have area cleared out for the next building we're going to build, and there goes the tree. Everybody haul off the logs. Yeah, you complain about all you want. Do it anyway. And life continues in Inception. as the 25th year of Inception dawns, we also have reached 25 people. So there's a nice little bit of symmetry to that. And they continue to come. 3 more pregnancies. Got a healthy amount of people now in all 3 age demographics. And we continue to move forward. You can see a marked visual difference. Obviously, this is a lot more clear than it was as we expand towards the river. And we also have been expanding our use of some resources such as tannin, but mostly everything is holding up. And we're not experiencing too severe growing pains as of yet. Almost ready for our next upgrade. So there'll be more fun things to go in the Mesolithic period, but with our expanded food sources we've been able to get, we're feeling pretty good about things. The adventure will continue. Till then, thanks for watching, everybody. There's 26. More Dawn of Man coming up soon.